The Tales of the Laxdale Saga is brought to you by NotaProfit.org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The Laxdale Saga, Part 6, Chapter Roman 38, The Death of Stigandi. Thorleik leaves Iceland now to tell of Stigandi. He became an outlaw and an evil to deal with. Thord was the name of a man who lived at Hundidale. He was a rich man, but had no manly greatness. A startling thing happened that summer in Hundidale, in that the milking stock did not yield much milk, but a woman looked after the beast there. At last people found out that she grew wealthy in precious things, and that she would disappear long and often, and no one knew where she was. Thord brought pressure to bear on her for confession, and when she got frightened, she said a man was wont to come and meet her, a big one, she said, and in my eyes very handsome. Thord then asked how soon the man would come again to meet her, and she said she thought it would be soon. After that Thord went to see Olaf, and told him that Stigandi must be about, not far away from there, and bade him bestir himself with his men and catch him. Olaf got ready at once, and came to Hundidale, and the bondswoman was fetched for Olaf to have talk of her. Olaf asked her where the lair of Stigandi was. She said she did not know. Olaf offered to pay her money if she would bring Stigandi within reach of him and his men, and on this they came to a bargain together. The next day she went out to herd her cattle, and Stigandi comes that day to meet her. She greeted him well, and offers to look through the hair of his head. He laid his head down on her knee, and soon went to sleep. Then she slunk away from under his head, and went to meet Olaf and his men, and told them what had happened. Then they went towards Stigandi, and took counsel between them as to how it should not fare with him as his brother, that he should cast his glance on many things from which evil would befall them. They take now a bag and draw it over his head. Stigandi woke at that, and made no struggle, for now there were many men to one. The sack had a slit in it, and Stigandi could see out through it the slope on the other side. There the lay of the land was fair, and it was covered with thick grass. But suddenly something like a whirlwind came on, and turned the sward topsy-turvy, so that the grass never grew there again. It is now called Brenna. Then they stoned Stigandi to death, and there he was buried under a heap of stones. Olaf kept his word to the bondswoman, and gave her freedom, and she went home to Hrut. Halbjorn Whetstow nigh was washed up by the surf a short time after he was drowned. It was called Norness where he was put in the earth, and his ghost walked about there a great deal. There was a man named Thorkel Skull, who lived at Thickshaw on his father's inheritance. He was a man of very dauntless heart and mighty of muscle. One evening a cow was missing at Thickshaw, and Thorkel and his house, Carl, went to look for it. It was after sunset, but was bright moonlight. Thorkel said they must separate in their search, and when Thorkel was alone he thought he saw the cow on a hill rise in front of him, but when he came up to it, he saw it was Whetstone eye and no cow. They fell upon each in mighty strength. Halbjorn kept on the defensive, and when Thorkel least expected it, he crept down into the earth out of his hands. After that Thorkel went home. The house Carl had come home already, and had found the cow. No more harm befell ever again from Halbjorn. Thorbjorn Esgeir, Jup was dead by then, and so was Melkorka, and they both lie in a cairn in Salmon River Dale. Lambi, their son, kept house there after them. He was very warrior-like, and had a great deal of money. Lambi was more thought of by people than his father had been, chiefly because of his mother's relations, and between him and Olaf there was fond brotherhood. Now the winter next after the killing of Kotkel passed away. In the spring the brothers Olaf and Thorleik met, and Olaf asked if Thorleik was minded to keep on his house. Thorleik said he was. Olaf said, "Yet I would beg you, kinsman, to change your way of life and go abroad. You will be thought an honourable man wherever you come. But as to Hrut, our kinsman, I know he feels how your dealings with him come home to him, and it is little to my mind that the risk of your sitting so near to each other should be run any longer, for Hrut has a strong run of luck to fall back upon, and his sons are but reckless bravos. On account of my kinship, I feel I should be placed in a difficulty if you, my kinsmen, should come to quarrel in full enmity." Thorleik replied, "I am not afraid of not being able to hold myself straight in the face of Hrut and his sons, and that is no reason why I should depart the country. But if you, brother, set much store by it and feel yourself in a difficult position in this matter, then, for your words I will do this, for then I was best contented with my lot in life when I lived abroad, and I know you will not treat my son Bolli any the worse for my being nowhere near, for of all men I love him the best." Olaf said, "You have indeed taken an honorable course in this matter, if you do after my prayer, but as touching Bolli, I am minded to do to him henceforth as I have done hitherto, and to be to him and hold him no worse than my own sons." After that the brothers parted in great affection. Thorleik now sold his land, and spent his money on his journey abroad. He bought a ship that stood up in Damielness, and when he was full ready, he stepped on board ship with his wife and household. That ship made a good voyage, and they made Norway in the autumn. Thence he went south to Denmark, as he did not feel at home in Norway, his kinsmen and friends there being either dead or driven out of the land. After that Thorleik went to Gautland. It is said by most men that Thorleik had little to do with old age, yet he was held a man of great worth throughout life. And there we close the story of Thorleik. Chapter XXXIX. Of Kjartan's friendship for Bolli at that time, as concerning the strife between Hrut and Thorleik. It was ever the greatest gossip throughout the broad firth dales how that Hrut had to abide a heavy lot at the hands of Kjartan and his sons. Then Osvif spoke to Gudrun and her brothers, and bade them call to mind whether they thought now it would have been the best counsel aforetime then and there to have plunged into the danger of dealing with such helmen, terrible people as Kjartan and his were. Then said Gudrun, "He is not counsel, bereft father, who has the help of thy counsel." Olaf now abode at his manor in much honor, and all his sons are at home there, as was Bolli, their kinsman and foster brother. Kjartan was foremost of all the sons of Olaf. Kjartan and Bolli loved each other the most, and Kjartan went nowhere that Bolli did not follow. Often Kjartan would go to the Saelingdale-spring, and mostly it happened that Gudrun was at the spring too. Kjartan liked talking to Gudrun, for she was both a woman of wits and clever of speech. It was the talk of all folk that of all men who were growing up at the time Kjartan was the most even match for Gudrun. Between Olaf and Osvif there was also great friendship, and often they would invite one another, and not the less frequently, so when fondness was growing up between the young folk. One day when Olaf was talking to Kjartan, he said, "I do not know why it is that I always take it to heart when you go to Lager and talk to Gudrun. It is not because I do not consider Gudrun foremost of all other women, for she is the one among womankind whom I look upon as a thoroughly suitable match for you. But it is my foreboding, though I will not prophesy it, that we, my kinsmen, and I, and the men of Lager will not bring altogether good luck to bear on our dealings together." Kjartan said he would do nothing against his father's will where he could help himself, but he hoped things would turn out better than he made a guess to. Kjartan holds to his usual ways as to his visits to Lager, and Bolli always went with him, and so the next seasons passed. Chapter XL. Kjartan and Bolli voyaged to Norway A.D. 999. Asgeir was the name of a man. He was called Eider Drake. He lived at Asgeir's river in Willowdale. He was the son of Audun Skokul. He was the first of his kinsmen who came to Iceland. He took to himself Willowdale. Another son of Audun was named Thorgrim Hoaryhead. He was the father of Esmund, the father of Grettir. Asgeir Eider Drake had 5 children. One of his sons was called Audun, father of Asgeir, father of Audun, father of Egil, who had for wife Ulfheid, the daughter of Eyjolf the Lame. Their son was Eyjolf, who was slain at the Althing. Another of Asgeir's sons was named Thorvald. His daughter was Dalla, whom Bishop Eilif had for wife. Their son was Gizur, the bishop. A third son of Asgeir was named Calf. All Asgeir's sons were hopeful men. Calf Asgeirsson was at that time out travelling, and was accounted of as the worthiest of men. One of Asgeir's daughters was named Thurid. She married Thorkel Kuggi, the son of Thord Yeller. Their son was Thorstein. Another of Asgeir's daughters was named Hrefna. She was the fairest woman in those northern country, sides, and very winsome. Asgeir was a very mighty man. It is told how one time Kjartan Olafsson went on a journey south to Bergfirth. Nothing is told of his journey before he got to Berg. There at that time lived Thorstein, Egil's son, his mother's brother. Bolli was with him, for the foster. Brothers loved each other so dearly that neither thought he could enjoy himself if they were not together. Thorstein received Kjartan with loving kindness, and said he should be glad for his staying there a long rather than a short time. So Kjartan stayed a while at Berg. That summer there was a ship standing up in steam, river, mouth, and this ship belonged to Calf Asgeirsson, who had been staying through the winter with Thorstein, Egil's son. Kjartan told Thorstein in secret that his chief errand to the south then was, that he wished to buy the half of Calf's ship, for I have set my mind on going abroad. And he asked Thorstein what sort of a man he thought Calf was. Thorstein said he thought he was a good man and true. I can easily understand, said Thorstein, that you wish to see other men's ways of life, and your journey will be remarkable in one way or another, and your kinsfolk will be very anxious as to how the journey may speed for you. Kjartan said it would speed well enough. After that, Kjartan bought a half share in Calf's ship, and they made up half shares partnership between them. Kjartan was to come on board when 10 weeks of summer had passed. Kjartan was seen off with gifts on leaving Berg, and he and Bolli then rode home. When Olaf heard of this arrangement, he said he thought Kjartan had made up his mind rather suddenly, but added that he would not foreclose the matter. A little later, Kjartan rode to Lager to tell Gudrun of his proposed journey abroad. Gudrun said, "You have decided this very suddenly, Kjartan." And she let fall sundry words about this, from which Kjartan got to understand that Gudrun was displeased with it. Kjartan said, "Do not let this displease you. I will do something else that shall please you." Gudrun said, "Be then a man of your word, for I shall speedily let you know what I want." Kjartan bade her do so. Gudrun said then, "I wish to go out with you this summer. If that comes off, you would have made amends to me for this hasty resolve, for I do not care for Iceland." Kjartan said, "That cannot be. Your brothers are unsettled yet, and your father is old, and they would be bereft of all care if you went out of the land. So you wait for me 3 winters." Gudrun said she would promise nothing as to that matter, and each was at variance with the other, and therewith they parted. Kjartan rode home. Olaf rode to the Thing that summer, and Kjartan rode with his father from the west out of Herdholt, and they parted at North River Dale. From thence Kjartan rode to his ship, and his kinsman Bolli went along with him. There were 10 Icelanders altogether who went with Kjartan on this journey, and none would part with him for the sake of the love they bore him. So with this following, Kjartan went to the ship, and Calf Asgeirsson greeted them warmly. Kjartan and Bolli took a great many goods with them abroad. They now got ready to start, and when the wind blew, they sailed out along Berg, Firth with a light and good breeze, and then out to sea. They had a good journey, and got to Norway to the northwards, and came into Thrandheim, and fell in with men there, and asked for tidings. They were told that change of lords over the land had befallen. In that Earl Hakon had fallen, and King Olaf Tryggvason had come in, and all Norway had fallen under his power. King Olaf was ordering a change of faith in Norway, and the people took to it most unequally. Kjartan and his companions took their craft up to Nidaros. At that time many Icelanders had come to Norway, who were men of high degree. There lay beside the landing, stage 3 ships, all owned by Icelanders. One of the ships belonged to Brand the Bounteous, son of Vermund Thorgrimsson, and another ship belonged to Hallfrid the Trouble, Bard. The third ship belonged to two brothers, one named Bjarni and the other Thorhall. They were sons of Broad, River, Skeggi, out of Fleetlythe in the east. All these men had wanted to go west to Iceland that summer, but the king had forbidden all these ships to sail, because the Icelanders would not take the new faith that he was preaching. All the Icelanders greeted Kjartan warmly, but especially Brand, as they had known each other already before. The Icelanders now took counsel together, and came to an agreement among themselves that they would refuse this faith that the king preached, and all the men previously named bound themselves together to do this. Kjartan and his companions brought their ship up to the landing stage, and unloaded it, and disposed of their goods. King Olaf was then in the town. He heard of the coming of the ship, and that men of great account were on board. It happened one fair weather day in the autumn that the men went out of the town to swim in the river Nid. Kjartan and his friends saw this. Then Kjartan said to his companions that they should also go and disport themselves that day. They did so. There was one man who was by much the best at this sport. Kjartan asked Bolli if he felt willing to try swimming against the townsman. Bolli answered, "I don't think I am a match for him." "I cannot think where your courage can now have got to," said Kjartan, "so I shall go and try." Bolli replied, "That you may do if you like." Kjartan then plunges into the river, and up to this man, who was the best swimmer, and drags him forthwith under, and keeps him down for a while, and then lets him go up again. And when they had been up for a long while, this man suddenly clutches Kjartan and drags him under, and they keep down for such a time as Kjartan thought quite long enough, when up they come a second time. Not a word had either to say to the other. The third time they went down together, and now they keep under for much the longest time, and Kjartan now misdoubted him how this play would end, and thought he had never before found himself in such a tight place, but at last they come up and strike out for the bank. Then said the townsman, "Who is this man?" Kjartan told him his name. The townsman said, "You are very deft at swimming. Are you as good at other deeds of prowess as at this?" Kjartan answered rather coldly, "It was said when I was in Iceland that the others kept pace with this one, but now this one is not worth much." The townsman replied, "It makes some odds with whom you have had to do. But why do you not ask me anything?" Kjartan replied, "I do not want to know your name." The townsman answered, "You are not only a stalwart man, but you bear yourself very proudly as well. But none the less you shall know my name, and with whom you have been having a swimming match. Here is Olaf the king, the son of Tryggvi." Kjartan answered nothing, but turned away forthwith without his cloak. He had on a kirtle of red scarlet. The king was then well nigh dressed. He called to Kjartan and bade him not go away so soon. Kjartan turned back, but rather slowly. The king then took a very good cloak off his shoulders and gave it to Kjartan, saying he should not go back cloakless to his companions. Kjartan thanked the king for the gift, and went to his own men and showed them the cloak. His men were nowise pleased as this, for they thought Kjartan had got too much into the king's power, but matters went on quietly. The weather set in very hard that autumn, and there was a great deal of frost, the season being cold. The heathen men said it was not to be wondered at that the weather should be so bad. It is all because of the newfangled ways of the king and this new faith that the gods are angry. The Icelanders kept all together in the town during the winter, and Kjartan took mostly the lead among them. On the weather taking a turn for the better, many people came to the town at the summons of King Olaf. Many people had become Christians in Thrandheim, yet there were a great many more who withstood the king. One day the king had a meeting out at Irar, and preached the new faith to men, a long harangue and telling. The people of Thrandheim had a whole host of men, and in turn offered battle to the king. The king said they must know that he had had greater things to cope with than fighting there with churls out of Thrandheim. Then the goodman lost heart, and gave the whole case into the king's power, and many people were baptized then and there. After that the meeting came to an end. That same evening the king sent men to the lodgings of the Icelanders, and bade them get sure knowledge of what they were saying. They did so. They heard much noise within. Then Kjartan began to speak, and said to Bolli, "How far are you willing, kinsman, to take this new faith the king preaches?" "I certainly am not willing thereto," said Bolli, "for their faith seems to me to be most feeble." Kjartan said, "Did ye not think the king was holding out threats against those who should be unwilling to submit to his will?" Bolli answered, "It certainly seemed to me that he spoke out very clearly that they would have to take exceeding hard treatment at his hands. I will be forced under no one's thumb." Said Kjartan, "While I have power to stand up and wield my weapons, I think it most unmanly, too, to be taken like a lamb in a fold or a fox in a trap. I think that is a better thing to choose, if a man must die in any case, to do first some such deed as shall be held aloft for a long time afterwards." Bolli said, "What will you do? I will not hide it from you." Kjartan replied, "I will burn the king in his hall. There is nothing cowardly in that." Said Bolli, "But this is not likely to come to pass, as far as I can see. The king, I take it, is one of great good luck and his guardian spirit mighty, and besides he has a faithful guard watching both day and night." Kjartan said that what most men failed in was daring, however valiant they might otherwise be. Bolli said it was not so certain who would have to be taunted for want of courage in the end, but here many men joined in, saying this was but an idle talk. Now when the king's spies had overheard this, they went away and told the king all that had been said. The next morning the king wished to hold a meeting, and summoned all the Icelanders to it. And when the meeting was opened, the king stood up and thanked men for coming, all those who were his friends and had taken the new faith. Then he called to him for a parley the Icelanders. The king asked them if they would be baptized, but they gave little reply to that. The king said they were making for themselves the choice that would answer the worst. "But, by the way, who of you thought it the best thing to do to burn me in my hall?" Then Kjartan answered, "You no doubt think that he who did say it would not have the pluck to confess it, but here you can see him." "I can indeed see you." Said the king, "Man of no small counsels, but it is not fated for you to stand over my head, done to death by you, and you have done quite enough that you should be prevented making a vow to burn more kings in their houses. Yet, for the reason of being taught better things than you know, and because I do not know whether your heart was in your speech, and that you have bravely acknowledged it, I will not take your life. It may also be that you follow the faith the better the more outspoken you are against it. And I can also see this, that on the day you let yourself be baptized of your own free will, several ships' crews will on that day also take the faith. And I think it likely to happen that your relations and friends will give much heed to what you speak to them when you return to Iceland, and it is in my mind that you, Kjartan, will have a better faith when you return from Norway than you had when you came hither. Go now in peace and safety wheresoever you like from meeting. For the time being you shall not be tormented into Christianity, for God says that he wills that no one shall come to him unwillingly." Good cheer was made at the king's speech, though mostly from the Christian men, but the heathen left it to Kjartan to answer as he liked. Kjartan said, "We thank you, king, that you grant safe peace unto us, and the way whereby you may most surely draw us to take the faith is, on the one hand, to forgive us great offences, and on the other to speak in this kindly manner on all matters, in spite of your this day having us and all our concerns in your power, even as it pleases you. Now, as for myself, I shall receive the faith in Norway on that understanding alone, that I shall give some little worship to Thor the next winter, when I get back to Iceland." Then the king said and smiled, "It may be seen from the mien of Kjartan that he puts more trust in his own weapons and strength than in Thor and Odin." Then the meeting was broken up. After a while many men egged the king on to force Kjartan and his followers to receive the faith, and thought it unwise to have so many heathen men near about him. The king answered wrathfully, and said he thought there were many Christians who were not nearly so well behaved as was Kjartan or his company either, and for such one would have long to wait. The king caused many profitable things to be done that winter. He had a church built, and the market town greatly enlarged. This church was finished at Christmas. Then Kjartan said they should go so near the church that they might see the ceremonies of this faith the Christians followed, and many fell in, saying that would be right good pastime. Kjartan with his following and Bolli went to the church. In that train was also Hallfrid and many other Icelanders. The king preached the faith before the people, and spoke both long and tellingly, and the Christians made good cheer at his speech. And when Kjartan and his company went back to their chambers, a great deal of talk arose as to how they had liked the looks of the king at this time, which Christians accounted of as the next greatest festival. For the king said, so that we might hear, that this night was born the Lord, in whom we are now to believe, if we do as the king bids us. Kjartan says, so greatly was I taken with the looks of the king when I saw him for the first time, that I knew at once that he was a man of the highest excellence, and that feeling has kept steadfast ever since, when I have seen him at folk meetings, and that but by much the best, however, I like the looks of him today, and I cannot help thinking that the turn of our concerns hangs altogether on our believing him to be the true God in whom the king bids us to believe, and the king cannot by any means be more eager in wishing that I take this faith than I am to let myself be baptized. The only thing that puts off my going straightway to see the king now is that the day is far spent, and the king, I take it, is now at table. But that day will be delayed, on which we, companions, will let ourselves all be baptized. Bolli took to this kindly, and bade Kjartan alone look to their affairs. The king had heard of the talk between Kjartan and his people before the tables were cleared away, for he had his spies in every chamber of the heathens. The king was very glad at this, and said, in Kjartan has come true the saw, high tides best for happy signs. And the first thing the next morning early, when the king went to church, Kjartan met him in the street with a great company of men. Kjartan greeted the king with great cheerfulness, and said he had a pressing errand with him. The king took his greeting well, and said he had had a thoroughly clear news as to what his errand must be, and that matter will be easily settled by you. Kjartan begged they should not delay fetching the water, and said that a great deal would be needed. The king answered and smiled. Yes, Kjartan, says he, on this matter I do not think you're eager. Mindedness would part us, not even if you put the price higher still. After that Kjartan and Bolli were baptized, and all their crew, and a multitude of other men as well. This was on the second day of Yule before holy service. After that the king invited Kjartan to his Yule feast with Bolli his kinsman. It is the tale of most men that Kjartan on the day he laid aside his white baptismal robes became a liegeman of the king's, he and Bolli both. Hallfrid was not baptized that day, for he made it a point that the king himself should be his godfather, so the king put it off till the next day. Kjartan and Bolli stayed with Olaf the king the rest of the winter. The king held Kjartan before all other men for the sake of his race and manly prowess, and it is by all people said that Kjartan was so winsome that he had not a single enemy within the court. Every one said that there had never before come from Iceland such a man as Kjartan. Bolli was also one of the most stalwart of men, and was held in high esteem by all good men. The winter now passes away, and, as spring came on, men got ready for their journeys, each as he had a mind to. Chapter 41. Bolli returns to Iceland A.D. 1000. Kalf Asgeirsson went to see Kjartan and asks what he was minded to do that summer. Kjartan said, I have been thinking chiefly that we had better take our ship to England, where there is a good market for Christian men. But first I will go and see the king before I settle this. For he did not seem pleased at my going on this journey when we talked about it in the spring. Then Kalf went away, and Kjartan went to speak to the king, greeting him courteously. The king received him most kindly, and asked what he and his companion Kalf had been talking about. Kjartan told what they had mostly in mind to do, but said that his errand to the king was to beg leave to go on this journey. As to that matter, I will give you your choice, Kjartan. Either you will go to Iceland this summer, and bring men to Christianity by force or by expedience, but if you think this too difficult a journey, I will not let you go away on any account, for you are much better suited to serve noblemen than to turn here into a chapman. Kjartan chose rather to stay with the king than to go to Iceland and preach the faith to them there, and said he could not be contending by force against his own kindred. Moreover, it would be more likely that my father and other chiefs, who are near kinsmen of mine, would go against thy will with all the less stubbornness the better beholden I am under your power. The king said, This is chosen both wisely and as beseems a great man. The king gave Kjartan a whole set of new clothes, all cut out of scarlet cloth, and they suited him well, for people said that King Olaf and Kjartan were of an even height when they went under measure. King Olaf sent the court priest, named Thangbrand, to Iceland. He brought his ship to Swanfirth, and stayed with Side Hall all the winter at Wash river, and set forth the faith to people both with fair words and harsh punishments. Thangbrand slew 2 men who went most against him. Hall received the faith in the spring, and was baptized on the Saturday before Easter, with all his household. Then Gizur the White let himself be baptized, so did XXXIX and many other chiefs, though there were many more who spoke against it. And then dealings between heathen men and Christians became scarcely free of danger. Sundry chiefs even took counsel together to slay Thangbrand, as well as such men who should stand up for him. Because of this turmoil Thangbrand ran away to Norway, and came to meet King Olaf, and told him the tidings of what had befallen in his journey, and said he thought Christianity would never thrive. In Iceland the king was very wroth at this, and said that many Icelanders would rue the day unless they came round to him. That summer XXXIX was made an outlaw at the thing for blaspheming the gods. Runolf Ulfson, who lived in Dale under Isles, Vels, the greatest of chieftains, upheld the lawsuit against him. That summer Gizur left Iceland and Hjalti with him, and they came to Norway, and went forthwith to find King Olaf. The king gave them a good welcome, and said they had taken a wise counsel. He bade them stay with him, and that offer they took with thanks. Sverding, son of Runolf of Dale, had been in Norway that winter, and was bound for Iceland in the summer. His ship was floating beside the landing stage all ready, only waiting for a wind. The king forbade him to go away, and said that no ships should go to Iceland that summer. Sverding went to the king and pleaded his case, and begged leave to go, and said it mattered a great deal to him, that they should not have to unship their cargo again. The king spake, and then he was wroth. It is well for the son of a sacrificer to be where he likes it worst. So Sverding went no whither. That winter nothing to tell of befell. The next summer the king sent Gizur and Hjalti to Iceland to preach the faith anew, and kept 4 men back as hostages, Kjartan Olafsson, Halldor, the son of Gudmund the mighty, Kolbein, son of Thord the priest of Frey, and Sverding, son of Runolf of Dale. Bolli made up his mind to journey with Gizur and Hjalti, and went to Kjartan his kinsman, and said, I am now ready to depart. I should wait for you through the next winter, if next summer you were more free to go away than you are now. But I cannot help thinking that the king will on no account let you go free. I also take it to be the truth that you yourself call to mind but few of the things that afford pastime in Iceland when you sit talking to Ingibjorg, the king's sister. She was at the court of King Olaf, and the most beautiful of all the women who were at that time in the land. Kjartan said, Do not say such things, but bear my greeting to both my kinsfolk and friends. Chapter Roman 42. Bolli makes love to Gudrun, A.D. 1000 after that Kjartan and Bolli parted, and Gizur and Hjalti sailed from Norway and had a good journey, and came to the Westman's Isles at the time the Althing was sitting, and went from thence to the mainland, and had their meetings and parleys with their kinsmen. Thereupon they went to the Althing, and preached the faith to the people in an harangue, both long and telling. and then all men in Iceland received the faith. Bolli rode from the Thing to Hrut in fellowship with his uncle Olaf, who received him with much loving kindness. Bolli rode to Lager to disport himself after he had been at home for a short time, and a good welcome he had there. Gudrun asked very carefully about his journey, and then about Kjartan. Bolli answered right readily all Gudrun asked, and said there were no tidings to tell of his journey. But as to what concerns Kjartan there are, in truth, the most excellent news to be told of his ways of life, for he is in the king's bodyguard, and is there taken before every other man. But I should not wonder if he did not care to have much to do with this country for the next few winters to come. Gudrun then asked if there was any other reason for it than the friendship between Kjartan and the king. Bolli then tells what sort of way people were talking about the friendship of Kjartan with Ingjibjorg, the king's sister, and said he could not help thinking the king would sooner marry Ingjibjorg to Kjartan than let him go away if the choice lay between the two things. Gudrun said these were good tidings, but Kjartan would be fairly matched only if he got a good wife. Then she let the talk drop all of a sudden, and went away, and was very red in the face. But other people doubted if she really thought these tidings as good as she gave out. She thought they were. Bolli remained at home in Hrut all that summer, and had gained much honor from his journey. All his kinsfolk and acquaintances set great store by his valiant bearing. He had, moreover, brought home with him a great deal of wealth. He would often go over to Lager, and while away time talking to Gudrun. One day Bolli asked Gudrun what she would answer if he were to ask her in marriage. Gudrun replied at once, "No need for you to bespeak such a thing, Bolli, for I cannot marry any man whilst I know Kjartan to be still alive." Bolli answered, "I think then you will have to abide husbandless for sundry winters if you are to wait for Kjartan. He might have chosen to give me some message concerning the matter if he set his heart at all greatly on it." Sundry words they gave and took, each at variance with the other. Then Bolli rode home.